On today's show, Evander Kane is heading to his hometown, the rumor mill heating up ahead of the NHL draft, and the Hockey Hall of Fame announces its 2025 class.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome inside this Wednesday, June 25th edition of the Locked On NHL podcast. I'm Ross Levitan. You can find me 5 days a week over at Locked On Ottawa Senators. And as always, on Wednesdays, it's my co-host from the Battle of Ontario, from Locked On Maple Leafs, Mike DiStefano. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets. That's if your first $5 bet wins. Just head to FanDuel to get started. And Mikey, on FanDuel, we've got a lot of props around the NHL draft, beginning with who the number 2 overall pick is. And there are some very juicy lines later on in the top 10. I cannot wait for the NHL draft. And it also brings a lot of trades. And we got one today. Evander Kane to the Vancouver Canucks in exchange for a 4th-round pick that was previously acquired by Edmonton in a trade last summer that sent Xavier Bourgault to the Ottawa Senators for Roby Järventie. So a mid-4th-round pick for Evander Kane. Clearly a cap dump and flexibility for Edmonton. But what was your immediate reaction when you saw the news this morning?
Yeah, I was kind of surprised that Vancouver wasn't able to get a little bit more for getting Edmonton out of a serious cap jam, to be honest with you. Like a cap dump, and they didn't have to give anything up for it. Like, what's a 4th-round pick is nothing. So I figured that there'd be a prospect or something that could have been attached to it. Vancouver could have got a little bit more for helping out the Edmonton Oilers. But ultimately, like, I think Vancouver needed a player like Evander Kane. He's a hometown kid. I know for years they've wanted Evander Kane there. The biggest issue I see, and I've seen a couple of people over on like Canucks Twitter saying, how do you go from letting Brock Besser walk to replacing him with Evander Kane? And someone's like, those two personalities are just completely different. And it is kind of interesting because Evander Kane probably has more of a personality like JT Miller, would you say? And that didn't mesh well with the group that's there now. I'll be interested to see how Evander Kane can kind of mesh with that Canucks locker room going into next season. But they needed a winger, a goal-scoring winger to replace Besser, and we'll see what Kane still has left in the tank. He's what now, 33 years old, I want to say?
Yep.
Yeah. Had 24 goals last year, or the year before. Didn't play all of last season till the playoffs. Only had 6 goals. But jumping on a moving train is tough. It's a bit of a gamble for Vancouver, but I would say Edmonton clearly won this deal.
Yeah, getting off of that $5.125 million. And I did miss one part because the way I made it sound, it was though the pick went to Vancouver.
No, they gave up the pick.
Right, but I was right that it was the pick that Edmonton acquired from Ottawa, but Edmonton sent that to Vancouver for Vasily Podkolzin last season. So the pick's going now back to Edmonton. So they get a 4th-round pick for Evander Kane. And I just can't imagine if Evander Kane was in that Vancouver Canucks locker room at this time last season and then all the drama that unfolded. It feels like if you're a team that maybe wants to settle things down in the locker room, I'm not sure this would be the direction that I would go, but clearly Kane will be a motivated player coming off back-to-back Stanley Cup final losses, going to his hometown, being in a contract year. And the Vancouver Canucks are going to need him to be all that and more. And I'd imagine the plan would be to play him with Elias Pettersson. Do you think that's how this trade should start out? And how do you think that fit would be for both players?
Yeah, probably play him with Elias Pettersson or Philip Hedl, whoever, he ends up playing next to, depending on how the rest of the offseason kind of plays itself out. But that would make some sense, getting a rugged, power forward winger to go with Petey on his right side. He's not going to have, there's no JT Miller anymore. There's no Brock Besser anymore. So he kind of is the guy who's going to fill into that role, I would think. And you got to see what it looks like. But it is interesting because he didn't play at all last season, and he had to jump on a moving train in the playoffs. That's tough to do. So I will be curious to see how it looks when he has, full training camp, full off season to rest up and get ready to go. Because if Evander Kane can score you 30 goals, I think you're happy with the deal if you're Vancouver. But if he's not, and he's only going to be a 20 goal scorer, and he's going to be taking stupid penalties like he was doing throughout the entire Stanley Cup final, then I'm not sure this is very much a worthwhile flyer for the Canucks to take.
Kane had 6 goals and 6 assists in 21 playoff games. His last
Pims. 44 Pims.
Yeah, why is it saying none? Puckpedia did me dirty. Obviously, he had Pims get tossed at the end of one of those games in the final game of the Stanley Cup final. So, from Vancouver's perspective, you're hoping to catch lightning in a bottle with Evander Kane and jumpstart the offense that they're losing from Brock Besser, seemingly on his way out as a pending unrestricted free agent. But if you're the Edmonton Oilers, I know you've got to reallocate some more money to Evan Bouchard, who's a restricted free agent this offseason. But what else would you be looking to do with that extra cap flexibility that they haven't seemingly had in a little while?
Yeah, I don't know if you can really, are you going to spend all of it? You still got to get Connor signed next year. So you're going to have to keep in mind that you're going to need some money going into next year too, right? And Colson will be an RFA. He'll probably be due for a little bit of an increase as well. So I don't know if you could sign all of it. Matthias Ekholm's a UFA next year, Wallman. But for sure, yeah, you got to get Evan Bouchard signed. And then probably you look to the goaltending position, right? You try and find yourself a goaltender. Now you've got some cap space and some flexibility to do it. It's interesting because Thatcher Demko is a name that I've heard is being not lobbed out there, but they're listening on Thatcher Demko. So you would think that possibly Edmonton could have, tried to pick up Demko in a bit of a bigger deal. And maybe this is just the start of something where, all right, we've tested the waters, got one deal done. Now let's talk and continue, chatting. Maybe we can get a Demko deal done at some point, or perhaps they try and go elsewhere to pick up a goaltender. But you'd think that has to be the number one priority for this offseason, right? Bouchard, get that deal done. Then you move to goaltending. And those are the two big things you got to kind of check off the list if you are Stan Bowman and the Edmonton Oilers.
Yeah, next offseason is going to be incredibly interesting for the Edmonton Oilers. You mentioned Connor McDavid, obviously the biggest fish in the league, but they've also got a number of other unrestricted free agents. The entire decor could basically have a makeover after this upcoming season. Of course, Evan Bouchard being the question mark, likely a long-term deal coming for him. Let's say that Bouchard signs a long-term deal. Next offseason, you would only have Bouchard, Darnell Nurse, and Ty Emberson at $1.3 million signed. Everybody else, as of right now, is either expired or expiring after next season. Both goaltenders are going into the last year of their deal. Skinner at 2.6, Calvin Pickard at $1 million. And there was also the rumor, and nothing's confirmed until the pen is signed, but that Trent Frederick will be signing a long-term contract just under $4 million. But until that's signed, the Edmonton Oilers have $16.2 million in cap space to play with Corey Perry, Jeff Skinner, Connor Brown, Kasperi Kapanen, Trent Frederick, and John Klingberg, unrestricted free agents, and the big RFA, Evan Bouchard. So fascinating trade between two Pacific Division Canadian teams, and one looking to get back on track after having a great series with the Edmonton Oilers 2 playoffs ago, and the Oilers trying to do anything and everything to get over the hump that is the Florida Panthers. Those aren't the only active teams, though. We've seen a number of trades. Yesterday on Locked On NHL, they spoke about the Trevor Zegras to Philadelphia trade. And how about what's to come? The NHL draft is in just over 48 hours from the time of this recording. What else could we see before the picks start flying on Friday night? That's next, and we'll wrap up today's show with a look at the Hockey Hall of Fame class of 2025 that saw first ballot Hall of Famers, but not Carey Price. That's next. You're listening to Locked On NHL, your team every day.
Today's episode is brought to you by Rugiet. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiet Ready. Rugiet Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that could take hours, Rugiet's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast, on average in 15 minutes. Effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. If traditional options haven't worked, Rugiet might be the answer. Over 150,000 men have already made the switch. I love that it's completely online. Rugiet connects you with a board-certified doctor and ships your treatment discreetly to your door. Head to Rugiet.com/LockedOnNHL and use the code LockedOnNHL to get 15% off today. That's RUGIET.com/LockedOnNHL and use the promo code LockedOnNHL for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit Rugiet website for full safety information.
All right, welcome back. Locked On NHL, your team every day. Shout out to the everydayers making us your first listen here, Monday through Friday. We appreciate you guys not only checking out the national show, but make sure to subscribe to all of the local Locked On NHL channels over at Locked On Senators. We are all draft all the time. We've got our mock draft, a 6-hour movie where we've got 9 different analysts making the picks over on Locked On Maple Leafs. It's more about who could be back, who won't be back, and how are they going to change the DNA. Mikey, our friends over at FanDuel have, as I mentioned, a ton of great props for the NHL draft. This will be a decentralized draft, so we're going to have the home camera views of these draft picks being made from the war room. Now, they are inviting the top 50 prospects to Los Angeles to be there, and one of the props that is available, who will the first overall pick hug first on the broadcast? And it has to be shown on the broadcast. If it's not shown, the bets will be voided. But minus 200 for the parents. I think that's probably safe. A sibling plus 155. A grandparent plus 2,500. And everything else is a long shot, significant other, teammate, uncle, aunt, or a coach. Are you going with parents?
Yeah, I'm going with the parents. That's just absolute chalk pick right there. You always see it, whether it was McDavid, whether it was Matthews, whether it was, Jack Hughes or last year, like it doesn't matter. It's always, the player and their parents sitting next to each other. And usually that's the first hug right away. So I expect for the first overall pick to be Matthew Schaefer, and I expect for him to hug one of his parents first. And that minus 200 bet, you're paying a little juice, but it seems like a pretty solid bet to me.
I would say so. Now, with that understood, the NHL draft is always full of surprises, and it's not always just the order of which these prospects are picked. It can also include trades. And last year, we saw some trades, more on day 2. The one that jumps out right away to me is Mikhail Sergachev's trade from Tampa to the Utah Hockey Club, now the Mammoth.
I find that happens a lot. I find like round 2, you got a lot of people who are really, really looking to move and shake with second round picks as opposed to first round picks. I am curious though, now it's decentralized, so you don't have all the GMs in the same room together. You think that'll impact player movement and trade volume at this draft?
Well, as you were saying that, I was thinking, I wonder if some general managers, maybe they're like, hey, especially the ones who don't have a lot of picks, they're like, hey, I can't come to the draft and not do anything. Let me get a trade in. Let's make this trip worthwhile. But we'll see. By the way, on that note, the Colorado Avalanche only have 2 picks in this draft, 1 4th and 1 7th. 2 picks.
Cost of trying to win. Trust me, the Maple Leafs have, of their original 7 selections that they had in this draft, they only own 3 of them, and it's the 5th, 6th, and 7th round pick. They trade away their top 4 rounds already years ago, dating back to 2-3 seasons ago when we saw these draft picks being traded. One of them was in the Nick Ritchie deal. Think about how long ago that was, when Nick Ritchie was a Maple Leaf. So yeah, I'm very familiar with the lack of a draft capital when it comes to the NHL draft, pal.
Well, how about the Calgary Flames just now getting their first round pick from the Matthew Tkachuk trade? Guys got 2 Stanley Cups and 3 finals appearances since that trade was done. And now Calgary will have a 32nd overall pick for their troubles.
You never thought that Calgary assumed it was going to be the last pick in the draft when they made that trade. There's no shot that thought that was going to be the 32nd pick in the NHL draft.
And they gave up 2 6th overall picks in separate trades to Florida, Matthew Tkachuk and Sam Bennett.
Yeah.
That's tough. But there is some interesting players available that they could have as the last pick of that first round. They also have the 18th overall selection. Calgary's actually a team. We talk about the trade between Edmonton and Vancouver. Calgary's such an interesting in-between team right now where they had a heck of a run with Dustin Wolf last season, but are they ready to get better now? Do they even want to? Or are they saying, hey, that 2026 draft, that's looking juicy. Let's keep this kind of retool going for one more season at least. Let's move off of Rasmus Anderson, whose name's been out there going into the final year of his contract. But I feel like it's kind of a sell low move on Rasmus Anderson. He had the worst year of his career in terms of kind of being out there a lot when the other team's putting the puck in the net. He had the lowest on-ice shooting percentage, though, of any defenseman that played over 1,000 minutes. So maybe some of the analytics teams on other organizations are like, hey, we can fix him. And he is kind of a hard-nosed offensive player. But what name are you most curious to see what happens with this week?
When it comes to the trade market, when it comes
let's go with trades. Let's go with trades.
I mean, there's a number of guys that I'm definitely interested to see what ends up happening with these guys. Like, let's pull up a trade bait board and kind of see who exactly is being is like up at the top of the trade bait boards. Like Evander Kane was one for a while, but he got dealt today. Zegras was one. Ooh, here's one that the other day there was a report there that Noah Dobson could be on the block and could be had. And obviously, they've got the number 1 overall pick with the Islanders, and they're expected to take a right shot, franchise defenseman in Matthew Schaefer. Could they move off of Noah Dobson, in the same night if someone comes knocking with a boatload of picks or a really good young scoring forward for them? That could be a possibility. Buffalo is a team, though, that I'm really interested in. They're one of those squads that could kind of tinker and maybe kind of tear it down, like take a step back. JJ Peterka is a name that's been out there. It's not likely he's going to sign an extension in Buffalo. Should they get something for him now before things get ugly? Alex Tuck's name has kind of been out there a little bit. So there's a couple names out in Buffalo that I'm kind of intrigued by. I know Bowen Byram as well, and Marco Rossi is another name who's not expected to sign long-term in Minnesota. Do they look to try and get something for him while he's still young and holds a lot of value? So there's a lot of really good, solid names out there that could garner some interest in the trade market over the next 48 hours.
And much to the point of Marco Rossi, who never really felt like a Bill Guerin type player, undersized, plays hard though, man. But to be a 5'9" centerman in the top 6, it's a pretty short list of the guys who are top 6 centermen under 5'10". Yeah, like you got Braden Point and not much else.
No, you're Braden Point's a pretty solid player. It's a good comp too. I do like Marco Rossi. He was someone like Vancouver who needs a second line center. Like that makes sense for Vancouver if they're gonna try and be competitive this season, or maybe they want to try and strike a deal and move out of Thatcher Demko. Maybe the Wild come calling there. Could they, have a blockbuster trade revolving, Rossi and Philip Gustafson for Demko, or maybe, is Wallstad included in there? I don't know, but I'm just trying to armchair GM it. But that's a fit that makes sense for the Canucks. But there's a lot of teams, I'm sure, that would love to have Marco Rossi on their squad.
It would be a blockbuster. And finally, Bill Guerin's hands are untied from the buyouts of Ryan Suter and Zach Parise. But much like Edmonton with Connor McDavid, the Wild have to pre-plan for next offseason or the pending extension that can start being negotiated this July 1st with Kirill Kaprizov, who they have to do everything and anything to make sure that Kirill Kaprizov stays in Minnesota. He is the heart and soul of that organization. So that's going to be a really interesting team to watch. Another team that I'm curious to see what the follow-up is the Anaheim Ducks. Like, they've been active already, acquiring Chris Kreider, getting rid of Trevor Zegras in separate deals. They have to be setting themselves up for a big move because Pat Verbeek, the general manager down there, has to see these young players who have now been incorporated. Great rookie season by Leo Carlsson last year, and you've got Mason McTavish there. Troy Terry's name came out recently as potentially on the move. Like, I think he's going to be really active, and it's about time for Anaheim. Like, it's go time for them. The rebuild has been persistent and prolonged. I think this is going to be an offseason where Anaheim looks at that Pacific Division and says, hey, beyond the top three, it is wide open, and we could have a shot if we make the right move. So I'm going to be looking for Anaheim. Obviously, around the draft, you're looking at San Jose because they control the draft again this year. 2 first-round picks, a number of picks in the second and third round. They've got such a young nucleus. Are they going to start being aggressive, trying to add NHL players to that? So those are a few of the teams that I'm going to be watching for as the NHL draft comes up this Friday night in Los Angeles. Anything else on the rumor mill you want to get into?
Well, it's just interesting. Like, you keep bringing up these teams, right? Like the Anaheim Ducks and the San Jose Sharks, and you're
throw Montreal in that mix too.
Montreal, you can toss into that mix. You know, like you're throwing out these teams that have been like perennial sellers for years, and they're now moving into the buyer's market, ready to kind of flip that switch and become a competitive hockey team. And you keep hearing that Chicago wants to continue to add to Bedard to be more competitive, and they don't want to be a losing franchise. And just makes me think, like, there's just, if all these teams are buying, like, who's selling? And maybe if you're a squad, and I bring up Buffalo again because there's so many players on that team that there could be interested in, you could start a bidding war if you're the only one selling off players. Pittsburgh's another one of those teams with like a Brian Rust type of player. You start selling off some of your guys. There's only a few, and there's a bunch of teams who are looking to add this summer. You could probably get a haul for some of those guys, like a Peterka, like a Tuck, like a Bowen Byram, if they decide to move on from players like that. So that's something interesting too. If you're a team that's kind of teetering on the fence, what do we do? Do we keep moving forward with this group that hasn't done well for us, or do we maybe take a step back? I think maybe the fact that there's so little sellers, it could really create a seller's market and just make it a really, really smart decision. Just kind of take a step back and move out a couple of pieces and maybe retool a little bit, rejig your core a bit.
The last team I will mention that also holds 2 first-round picks is the Columbus Blue Jackets. And they overperformed last season versus expectations. They were knocking on the door late.
Full send if you're Columbus.
You know how much cap space they have right now?
A boatload.
$40 million.
Yeah, they'll be in on Marner. I don't think he's going to go there. He's already told them once before that he was unwilling to sign an offer sheet to go there. I don't think he has any interest in Columbus, but I do think that they'll throw around some cash this offseason.
They are flush with cash.
Yeah.
They still have $30 million to get to the floor, give or take. $25 million to get to the floor. Now, they do have some contracts that need to be signed. That's a team I'm going to be watching for.
Yeah.
And we're also looking ahead to November when the Hockey Hall of Fame will officially induct its class of 2025. But the names, we know them now. And we'll get to that next. You're listening to Locked On NHL, your team every day. Welcome back, Locked On NHL, your team every day, a part of Locked On Podcast Network. Shout out to the everydayers making us your first listen Monday through Friday. We also have local shows every day of the week. You can find us free and available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Well, the wait is over for some, and for others, first ballot Hall of Famers. You've got the news yesterday that we've been waiting for each and every year. It's about right before the draft. You learn who's coming into the Holy Grail. And first ballot Hall of Famers, we got 2 of them, both defensemen. Three first defensemen, all 3?
No, but 3 first ballot. Jumbo's first ballot too, no?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And well deserving at that. But
Mhm.
Zdeno Chara and Duncan Keith on the back end. Like the NHL ran through those two defensemen. Without Nick Lidstrom at the start of their career, both those guys would have even more Norris trophies. Duncan Keith has 2. Chara has 1. Chara is obviously a player I grew up watching. He was in Ottawa from when I was 9 years old until about 13 or 14. And just you knew right away. A guy 6'9" that could skate like that and was as physical and had so much offensive potential. You knew that he was going to have a heck of a career, but Hockey Hall of Fame, first ballot, incredible for a guy who was so gangly when he got drafted and pretty much given away as a throw-in in the Alexei Yashin trade. Ottawa got a second overall pick they used on Jason Spezza in that trade. That's a pretty decent trade. A disgruntled Lee Yashin for Chara and Spezza. Not bad. But who are you kind of tipping your hat to most in this Hall of Fame class? And maybe to get into the conversation, we should just read through who the Hockey Hall of Fame will be inducted. We mentioned Zdeno Chara. We mentioned Duncan Keith, Joe Thornton. Those are the first ballot Hall of Famers. And a man who has waited far too long. Alexander McGillney will be inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame. And 2 women will also be inducted, Brianna Decker and Jennifer Botterill, who you now see on Hockey Night in Canada, but had a heck of an international career with Team Canada. Brianna Decker with Team USA as well. Both unbelievable professional hockey players in their own right. Then on the outside of the actual players, Danielle Sauvageau will be in there as well, taking part in 7 Olympic Games as a hockey coach, general manager. She is now general manager of the Montreal Victoire of the PWHL, the first woman ever elected as a builder into the Hockey Hall of Fame. And then Jack Parker, the legendary coach from Boston University. Get this. At BU, his teams won 3 NCAA titles, appearing in a record 24 NCAA tournaments. He coached at Boston University for 40 years, from 1973 till 2013. Well-deserved honor from all of the Hockey Hall of Fame induction this season.
Yeah, to me, who am I tipping a cap to? Alex McGillney is the one that put the biggest smile on my face. It's just because he's waited so long, 16 years. He's been eligible for the Hall and continually was snubbed by the Hall of Fame selection committee. And finally he gets in there. And every year he was always, at the top of the list. And we always, spend 5 minutes tipping the cap and claps for everyone who makes it, but we spend more time talking about the snubs than everyone who doesn't make it typically. And McGillney was always in that conversation. And finally, he gets the call to the Hall, and I'm really, really happy for it. And I just don't know how it took so long. I mean, on ice career, like almost 500 goals in the NHL, over 1,000 points in like less than 1,000 games, more than the point per game player. Won a Stanley Cup, played for multiple teams, 76 goal season. The accolades on the ice are there. But for me, honestly, when you couple that with the off ice story of him defecting, being the first to defect from the Soviet Union, allowing all these other Russians to come over after him, like he's the OG. And, you may not have, the Pavel Bures, you may not have, your Geno Malkins, your Alex Ovechkins, if it weren't for Alex McGillney. So to me, I feel as though it was a long time coming. You can't really tell the story of hockey without telling the story of Alex McGillney. So it's about time that he got recognized and got the call to the Hall.
It's well deserved and beyond time. Speaking of snubs, it's also time for Keith Tkachuk. I mean, over 500 goals as well. I mean, eventually you're going to have to put him in as the builder category if his kids keep playing the way they are.
Yeah, really. Yeah.
He had a hell of a career. I don't know. I feel like that's got to be next. Other snubs, some people say.
Well, Carey Price is the clear cut like snub there. And I'd have to agree. And granted, it was a very tough year in terms of like first year on the ballots, like Joe Thornton, Duncan Keith, and Zdeno Chara. Like you can't really argue that those guys aren't first ballot worthy either. But throughout his entire career, Like you always said, future Hall of Famer, first ballot guy, Carey Price. Like that guy was the best goaltender in the world for at least 5-6 years, where he was easily known as that. And he won MVP. He won the Ted Lindsay Award back in 15-16. Literally won both of those awards. He was the greatest player on the planet, voted by the writers and by the players themselves that season. The way he took Montreal to a Stanley Cup in the COVID year was unbelievable. That team had no business being anywhere near the playoffs, let alone the Stanley Cup final. And it was really like him who kind of dragged that team there. I'm kind of surprised that there wasn't more people banging the table for Carey Price, especially since he was a Montreal Canadian, such a historic franchise. You would think that, there would have been some fans in there banging that drum, banging the table for him to get in, but he wasn't. He'll have to wait until year 2, be a second-year ballot guy.
Yeah, I mean, he's getting in. There's no doubt about that.
Oh,
I mean,
sure.
even if it wasn't for all those amazing accolades that continually add to his case, I would say just based on his international record with Team Canada,
Right.
he's a Hall of Fame. Like
World Junior, gold medal, couple gold medals. Yeah.
Do you know that in his pro career, let me make sure I'm getting this right because this is ridiculous. Carey Price, did he? No, where's the Olympics? Yeah, the Olympics are on here. He only played 5 games at the Olympics. I guess he only played in 2014, right?
Yeah, he only played
it was Luongo and Broder in 2010.
Like a stupid goals against and save percentage.
Yeah, so in the World Juniors, he went 6-0 for Team Canada. The Olympics, he went 5-0. At the World Cup, he went 5-0. At the Hlinka Gretzky, he went 2-0. His only losses wearing a Team Canada jersey were at the under-18s, where he went 2-2. That's ridiculous.
That's pretty wild. That's pretty wild. So yeah, the NHL accolades are one thing, but then internationally, the guy was nearly unbeatable in the crease. And I'll always remember the 07. It was the semifinal round against the Americans. Him and Jonathan Toews leading the team in that deep shootout, if you recall that back in the day. That was when I think our generation was first introduced to Carey Price and Johnny Toews, and that's when I became a fan of him and ended up in Montreal a couple of years later, and guy was an absolute stud for more than a decade.
Only the Stanley Cup eluded him. He got a Calder Cup championship, a World Junior gold medal, Olympic gold medal, World Cup gold medal. He was a playoff MVP in the AHL. He was first All-Star in the CHL. CHL Goalie of the Year, All-Rookie Team, Vezina Trophy, Jennings Award, Ted Lindsay, MVP, Bill Masterton, best goalie at the Olympics, best goalie at the World Juniors, and the best goalie in the WHL. He was generational.
Not bad. Not bad.
And the iconic Pierre Maguire rant when he was drafted 5th overall. They have so many other needs. That's just not a fit. That's tough. That's tough.
Worked out for Montreal. Definitely worked out for Montreal Canadiens.
But congrats all around. I mean, these guys are all well deserving to be in the Hockey Hall of Fame. Some first ballot Hall of Famers to potentially keep an eye on next season. Patrice Bergeron, yes,
lock.
And the other two, I don't think are even close to first ballot. Phil Kessel and Eric Stahl are in this article here.
Phil Kessel's interesting. I've had a few debates on whether or not Kessel is considered a Hall of Famer or not. That's going to be. He may have to wait a few years. He may eventually get in, but he's not a lock to be a Hall of Famer, if you ask me.
No, is Phil Kessel higher on the Hall of Fame list than Jason Spezza? He's got the cups. That's a difference.
I think so. Yes, I think so. But I also don't see. Yeah, I believe so. I just don't see Spetz as a Hall of Famer though either.
No, exactly. I think they're Hall of very good.
Yeah. I would put Kessel in the maybe category where I truly don't think Spezza is a real consideration for the Hall. Great player, good player, but not Hall of Fame worthy.
Hall of very good. So let me do this to end the show. Phil Kessel versus, and these are also players who are going to be competing for the Hockey Hall of Fame next season. Another first ballot option, Eric Stahl.
Kessel.
Carey Price.
Price.
Patrick Marleau.
Oh, that's tough. That
All-time NHL games played leader.
I know that one's a tough one. How many goals does he have in total? Who's got more goals right now? Kessel?
Oh, I have no idea.
Yeah, whoever has the most goals, I guess, would tilt the
566 goals for Patrick Marleau. It's got to be more. 1,197 points.
Give me Marleau.
Okay, Henrik Zetterberg. He's a member of the Triple Gold Club.
Zeddy. Yeah. He's got the international career to go with it.
Ryan Getzlaf.
I know Getzlaf also, I think, is a Triple Gold member, if I'm not mistaken. But I
two-time Olympic gold medalist. I don't know.
Yeah, two-time gold medalist, won a
Stanley Cup champ. Yeah.
I'm gonna go with Phil though over Getzlaf.
Crazy that he led the Ducks in scoring on their Stanley Cup run with 17 points in 21 games. McDavid had 33 points this playoffs, maybe more.
And they didn't win. They didn't win.
Crazy. So there you have it. That's the Hockey Hall of Fame 2025 class. Go check out our local shows for more. For today, we say goodbye. Thanks so much for listening, watching, and engaging with the show. For Mike DiStefano, I'm Ross Levitan. This has been another edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, your team every day.